Well, I want to introduce our final speaker for tonight. And if you want to talk about someone who is driving global change through technology, I want to introduce you to Maura O'Neill. She's the CIO for USAID. Let me explode that acronym for you. And we do that often at Palantir because we work with a lot of agencies with acronyms, and so we've got to explode it. That means that she's the Chief Innovation Officer for the United States Agency for International Development. Her group is constantly embracing new ideas and technology to improve the lives economically and social for people, especially women worldwide. I'd love to hear about what she's seen, how technology has developed and changed that kind of purpose, and I want to know about what USAID is looking forward to next year. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's a particular pleasure for me to come here because I grew up not too far away from here. So when I walked in, I was sort of tempted. There was nobody here yet, and it's so, I've got the West Coast so much in my blood. I thought about texting, just send my things, I'm not coming back. But anyway, so I'm excited to be here. I'm at the U.S. Agency for International Development, and when I told people that I took this job and I'm from the West, most people on the West Coast didn't actually know what it was. So let me just tell you by way of a story. My first day that I came to USAID was the Haiti earthquake. We were all sitting at our computers, and all of a sudden across came this devastating earthquake. We worked all night because we didn't actually have visibility on whether we could land planes, whether we could bring ships in, and how we were going to, what the extent of the damage was and how we were going to respond to it. It affected a third of the country. It is in human modern history the most serious urban disaster that we have experienced. And here's how data made a difference. There was a woman in Kenya who created, as a result of the elections, there's violence here, location device called Ushahidi. It was repurposed almost immediately in Haiti. It was responsible for locating 60,000 people and saving thousands of people's lives. So at USAID, we are the foreign policy, we are the development arm of the government's foreign policy. We operate in 80 countries. We are a complement to the troops that we need to send overseas or our diplomatic efforts. We are the front lines for humanitarian assistance, but also for food, health, climate change, and a number of things to human rights, free and fair elections that we care about. So let me, let me first just give a huge shout out to Palantir. They have been on the leading edge of just hugely thinking about how data can change the world. And if you thought that it was an oxymoron, we brought a bunch of geeks, some of which were girls and some of which were boys, to lunchtime at the G8 when we hosted it at the government. And we had 6 flash talks, each of which were 3 minutes long, about how technology and data could actually change food security in the world. And it was amazing. So thank you very much to Jason and to the entire team here who's really making a difference. And just a real shout out to Natalie and Carolyn at Wells Fargo. I had an amazing conversation during drinks. So here's what they asked me to tell you about my technology history. So I was born in 1956. I usually don't talk about that, but you had to start somewhere. That was the notion of what the computer was back there. It was 4 MB, and you can see it was a white male, so that was sort of what life was about in the 50s. This was actually the first computer I worked on, which is an Apple II. I mean, I did actually have one programming class in graduate school in mainframe, but this is when I started my first business. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started 4 businesses. This was the first computer. It was an Osborne 64, that is in 64K, not 64. I worked out of the basement of my house. It was the first portable because it was sort of like a suitcase, and when my kids were asleep, I could go up, I could bring my computer upstairs and work. We went to a mobile phone, and of course, now we're at an iPhone. What I hope that you get from this picture is really what I hope that you will take away from tonight, which is, where is the trend going? The trend is going cheaper, faster, smaller, mobile, and more ubiquitous. And if, as Wayne Gretzky told us, the famous ice hockey player, the people who win are people that skate to where the puck's going, not where the puck is. So tonight I'll tell you where I think some of the trends are in the world, but I'm not any smarter than you. So if you think the trends are someplace else, then go for it, because a good friend of mine was the woman that Jeff Bezos came to in Seattle to look for some money when he was first starting Amazon. And he does the whole pitch about books on the internet. And she says, you know, nobody's going to buy books on the internet. That is singularly the stupidest idea I've ever said. But I have this friend, Tom Alberg. He invests in these wild and crazy things. Go talk to him. Tom invested $50,000, and it was later worth $150 million. So if I tell you some trends that don't seem to make sense tonight, then I may be like that woman that turned down Jeff Bezos. But I also am going to tell you about 4 trends that I think are changing the world, and you can decide for yourself whether they're ones you agree with. I'm going to tell you about what I think the unique challenges as a girl and a woman is, because I think we made huge progress. I was telling somebody the other day that when I was in my 20s, that was before Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, that barely a day and certainly a week didn't go by before I was propositioned in the workforce to go home and have to sleep with a guy. And it wasn't exactly something that I was also raised a Catholic and was trained by nuns. So I wasn't, as somebody said at cocktail hour today, dressing for it or asking for it. So anyway, so I'll talk about what I think are some of the unique challenges for women, and then what I hope will be some of my thoughts that I'd like to leave with you. But this is what I think. I think there are 4 major trends. There's only 1 billion people, 7 billion people in the world that are actually on the internet. And we think in the next decade there will be 1 to 3 billion more. That is actually a double, tripling, or quadrupling of that. That's really an astounding number. And you think about in your lifetime what the internet and that connectivity has meant. The second big trend is that HSBC, which is a global bank headquartered in England, says that 2/3 of all economic activity in the world, not just growth, is going to come from the emerging markets. That's not going to come if they are if you don't have stable governments, if you don't have adequate infrastructure, if people are ravaged by disease. And so the fact of the matter is that we've shopped till we've dropped in the US. About 75% of our economy is based on shopping, that is retail. So we're not going to build our economy by actually shopping more. In fact, it's going to be those emerging markets that are going to drive any growth. So our jobs in the future are going to be global, whether they're based in Palo Alto or whether they're based in Mozambique or whether they're based in India. So lots more people on the internet, lots more connectivity, lots more economic growth overseas. And then the third one, which I'm the most excited about, which I think will actually fundamentally have the biggest change, and that is mobile financial services. There are 7 billion phones in the world. 2 billion of the people that have those phones have no bank account. So think about if you didn't have any ability to become an entrepreneur, to order things, to transact. If you're a woman in a domestically difficult situation where your brother, your father, your cousin, every male in the family actually controlled all your money, think about what it would be amazing to have that mobile phone in a secret way hold all of your money, and what power that would be. So we think it's going to be mobile financial services, and we think it's going to transform the world, particularly for women and girls. You know, Virginia Woolf is a very famous English author, and she wrote a really terrific book that if you haven't read, it's called A Room of One's Own. And I like to say that what I'm passionate about and what I hope to create is a wallet of one's own, and that's what women need. The fourth trend, I think, is that we're actually, what you see in this is we're hardwired for connection. And it's an emotional thing. I believe that we'll find out there's a reason why 1 billion people are on Facebook. It's we desperately, desperately need to connect. We need to connect tonight. We need to connect in our community. We need to connect in our village. And increasingly, we need to connect with people like us in a global world. So as you think about your careers, as you think about what the opportunities are for big data, et cetera, more people on the internet, everything faster, cheaper, more mobile, mobile financial services. Think and imagine what that is if you could buy, transact, have customers all over the world, that it is in fact a global world, that you have to think globally from the very beginning. And the fourth is that you've got to have a deep human connection, or you're not going to stay in business, or you're not going to be sustained to do the best work that you've ever done. So now let's go to, and here's some of the stuff that I think, these are the Google glasses, it's all about the cloud, and these are some of the amazing new technologies, and maybe many of the people in this room are actually working on them. So now I'd like to talk about a deeply personal issue. I'm in my mid-50s, and I've struggled with this issue of what it means to be a girl and then a woman and a mom and a wife, and to stay relatively happy in all of those, and some of the unique challenges. I think I'll put it in some sort of perspective. I was fortunate enough in my mid-20s I met my husband when I was 19, so I had my kids really early, and I was on the board of a national not-for-profit, and I was moving up the ladder on the board, and I was the heir apparent. So everybody knows that you're sort of the next in line, and it's obviously you're going to get the new board presidency. So we came to the board meeting. I was nursing my first child. My husband came with me and took care of the child over that weekend, which wasn't exactly the story of our lives, but it was that weekend. And there was nobody more surprised when the board nominating committee came together and they did not actually choose me. And the reason why they said, Maura, we know you have a new child, and we figured that you just couldn't add this to your life. And so I think that what was amazing that happened in my 20s is for people making decisions about my life, about my choice as a mother, a career person, without consulting me, without asking me, but they thought it was best for me, and they passed me over for somebody. I've had an amazing career for which I am so grateful to have had the opportunities. And at one of my lowest points professionally in my career, where something really bad had happened, and I think it was at least in part because I was a woman. And it's for another conversation, but I do think that I've done a bunch of research on why women get within spitting distance of the CEO jobs in the most famous corporations and leave. And it isn't that they're all having babies, despite every single article that the press ever wants to write about us, that's the single reason why we don't have our fair share of jobs at the top. And I went to see a woman in her 70s, and I was pretty distraught about why this had happened. And she said, Maura, what are you whining about? You've had more opportunities in your entire life than most women in all of human history. And in fact, what she said to me, which was so important, and I hope that I will pass along to you, is that life is in fact a marathon, and that all we've done is take the baton from our moms and our grandmas, and it's our job to run that next race on behalf of realizing our full potential and pass it on to our daughters. And that in fact, we hope that we have created more opportunities for our daughter than our mothers and grandmothers ever had. And I tell you that because a month ago, I was involved in one of the most pioneering things. Now, I've started 4 companies. I've been honored with being Business Person of the Year in Seattle. On the faculty at Berkeley. I was Chief of Staff in the Senate. I've been at AID. I've been honored to be a presidential appointment. So, you know, not bad, right? So I have this incredible thing that I'm working on globally. We have this really groundbreaking dinner across from the White House. 8 CEOs, 4 ambassadors, a number of members of NGOs, I'm in charge of it. I've been running it, really groundbreaking. And one of the key people who's a staff to one of the CEOs sends me a note the night before and says, at your table, I assume you will take the notes. This is 2012. And I tell you this not to talk out of school or not to sort of say that those two things will happen to you. But they generally happen in much more subtle ways, where you're passed over or you're not given an opportunity, and you think, if only I was better, if only I was smarter, if only I was better connected, if only I did something, fill in the blank. And I'm not here to say that life isn't about working hard, being smart, getting up to bat, striking out, getting up to bat again. But I am saying as a woman that you need to understand that we live in a world where still the research says when there's a resume that says Maura O'Neill and the exact same resume in research is named Mark O'Neill, they will promote him and give him more money almost every time over Maura O'Neill. That is the world in which we live in, and I tell you that only so that it doesn't stop you, and in fact it motivates you to create a different kind of world for yourself, for your sisters, for your cousins, and for your daughters. Because here we have one of the most amazing women that I've had the privilege to work with, Secretary Hillary Clinton, who I think is the epitome of how you can change the world. And it is clearly one of the things that President Obama, if he was here today, says he's most proud of in terms of the accomplishments in his administration. So the fact of the matter is there's an enormous amount of role models. We come in all different flavors and sizes and shapes and nationalities and religious faiths. Maybe some of you don't want to have children, and that ought to be an okay decision, and you shouldn't have to defend it. Some of you will decide to live your life with another woman, and thank goodness we are increasingly living in a world where that's possible. One of the things I'm proudest of at USAID is we just provided an LGBT partnership globally to try to invest in countries, civil society groups, to create more opportunities and more openness around there. So I tell you that because I think that you will find that you have to be fearless, and that's if you take away one thing that I hope that magic fairy dust that you put from me in your pocket, it will be that this is possible to do amazing things, that you are capable of much more than you ever think you are. And so when that little voice, that nasty little voice, says into your head, if only I was, or I could if, you just set it aside and you barrel through that brick wall. So lastly, I will tell you the 4 things that I care most about and what I hope that I will leave you with tonight. I think that you ought to be bold. You heard an amazing set of women up here talking about big, bold stories. And I hope what you will do is go home tonight, and on your walk home or on your drive home, say to yourself, how can I be bigger and bolder in life? How can I think about more things to do in a bigger way? How can I help that person next to me? How can I use that intelligence to really change the world? Be generous. Oprah Winfrey has done an amazing job, both as an entrepreneur, but also as understanding what it means to live our lives from generosity. She was having a rough patch in her company. It was all sort of at each other's throat. And she said, you know, I hate this, and my name's on the door. And she decided to say, and you know, Jerry Springer was there, and it was all about nastiness TV. She tried that, wasn't very good at it, and said, wait a minute. And she said, I'm going to do Change Your Life TV. And she decided to make generosity the piece at which she shows up every day and does her work. Be joyful. I say not be happy, but be joyful. I had this conversation with my husband this morning. I flew from Washington, D.C. via Seattle, which is really where my house and my husband are, on my way down here. And we were going to the airport this morning, and he was complaining about something. And I said, Vaho, you know what? I actually believe that our homeostatic state ought to be joyful. So it doesn't mean that it's Pollyannish, that there aren't lousy days. Listen, I have a lot of lousy days. It was a lousy day when you had 250,000 people die in Haiti, and to believe that every single minute that you weren't able to get water there or to get health services there, that somebody that you care deeply about was actually dying. So that doesn't mean that doesn't happen in life, that a child doesn't get sick, that your mom that you dearly love doesn't die, but wake up every day saying, how am I going to be joyful today? Be determined and innovate. It's, as I say, it's all about failing fast and failing forward. And I think that if you are voracious learners, that life will be an amazing, amazing journey. We only have one dance card, and so I hope that you, along with I, will fill it up as most as possible. And then I'll leave you with one data story at the end of it. About 6 years ago, I was teaching at Berkeley, and I had a bunch of executive MBA students from Berkeley, Columbia, and the London Business School, and I was teaching a class in India on India and globalization. And a friend of mine said, there's this amazing guy, he's at Google, you should go see him. And we sat at a restaurant for about 5 hours, closed the restaurant down, and let me tell you his story, because I think that it's an inspiration for my life. I knew much of the story, but we brought him to the White House when we did a data jam. We said, how could we open up and unleash all the data and development to drive faster, cheaper, better outcomes? And I said, Lalatesh, will you come? Well, Lalatesh started at Google. He had done his PhD in robotics at Carnegie Mellon. And the intel that he had in his robotics was used in one of the first early search engines at Google, way before it became public. He's an engineer. He opened India for Google. He then went on to become head of engineering for emerging technologies. And he had this notion. That you could use data to map the world in the way Google Maps had done. But we only had 1 billion, it took all of human history to map 1 billion people. And there were 7 billion. So how could we do that? So we came up with this idea that, well, what if we all just mapped our neighborhood? And if we mapped it globally, we could actually map the world. So he tells the story much more compelling than I do. But the project was turned down 7 times. He was either fired or threatened to be fired 3 times. He stopped being able to metabolize food without taking pills every day. And he began to look at the people that we have the opportunity to serve around the world. And he says, I'm complaining. I want to create a different life for the people that I know have it much, much worse than I did. So he launched MapMaker, which many of you maybe know. In a few years, they mapped 1.5 billion people. And last year, the government of Pakistan, who asked for those MapMaker maps when they had the devastating floods, they wrote them a letter saying that they had used these maps to identify 800,000 people and that they had saved 250,000 lives. So I know that there's a Lalatesh sitting in this audience tonight, and I am enormously excited and hope that you will be fearless so that I can be up here and tell your story 5 years from now. Thank you very much for the privilege and honor of being here tonight.